Okay. We'll call the September 22nd, 2022 area planning meeting to order. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Since Madam Secretary is not here, I will do roll call. Daryl Drew.
Present.
Brian Rod.
Present.
Darren Price.
Here.
Leota King. Brian Durham. Here. Dale Munson.
Here.
Bill Mackey.
Here.
Robert Stewart. Jeff Wesley.
Present.
Bill McDaniel. On vacation. Okay. So we have a quorum. So moving ahead to item 1 on the agenda, home-based business review. All of you should have the draft in front of you in our format to replace the home-based and rural home-based business, section 135.35, to the tiered system that we had talked about previously, and includes Mr. Naylor's request that a tier 3 home be a special exception. And then all of the requirements of that special exception appear on the final page of the draft. So to refresh memory, the tier 1 is you don't need to ask for permission to have your home office essentially or to telecommute. That would be a tier 1. Tier 2 would require staff approval on personal services that include no employees other than immediate family, things like personal training and tutoring, one-station barber shops, those sorts of things can be approved by staff. Anything that exceeds that would be tier 3, and that's when you get into the special exception, as well as a design release potentially from the state of Indiana, a class 1 design release, if the area is larger than 600 square feet, or if you're doing significant remodeling to make the business work in your home. Is there any discussion, any further discussion on this draft? Do we have any changes or corrections for this draft? I know we've been talking about this now. This is, what, 6 months? After, we had it 2 years ago, we discussed it, and then it kind of went to the back burner as other things took precedent. But moving to the tier 3, or the 3-tiered system. The only change I have is under item K, which is the fee schedule for the permit. That should be put into our fee schedule that the commissioner, or the county's fee schedule that the commissioners adopted, and not included in the actual ordinance as presented. I think we've all agreed to never put our fees within the actual change to the code, to only ask the commissioners to adopt a fee schedule based on the permit requirement. And I knew that took some time to get through as well. And then we would also delete Bill's comments on IF, not needed in there, but something to consider in the future, but at least for now, that would not be included. With if nobody has anything further, I would entertain a motion to move forward to go to public hearing with the proposed changes to home-based and rural-based businesses, section 135.35 of the zoning code.
I would make that motion. Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And the motion passes. So we will move forward for a public hearing for October for the changes to section 135.35 of the zoning code. The permit software, I talked to Bill last week before he left for vacation, and the week previous to that, the permit software was scheduled to go live on the September 15th. I'm assuming that it went live on the 15th. I don't know if he's ran into any problems. He's been on vacation this week, so probably hadn't had any problems with it. But expect growing pains with a change from pen and paper to a digital system. We know it. We should expect it. It'll definitely, in the long run, be for the better to be able to submit those documents online, to not have to send faxes or scan and email documents. We can fill them out online, get into this century, even though we're 22 years late on moving into that. But really, kudos to Bill and all the work, and to the county commissioners for moving forward, and the council for paying for the software. And I think it's going to be the ability for multiple departments to potentially use this software when needing various permits or anything is going to be huge for the county. Comprehensive plan update. I know there's a draft submitted to the state, to Okra, to review our draft. There were changes, some errors that appeared in the draft with regard to people in office. So the office holders were wrong in the original draft. But outside of that, I don't think there were any changes that needed to happen. We are waiting on not Okra's approval, Okra's thumbs up that you're good to move forward. Once that happens, we're required to have a public hearing to recommend or not recommend the city of Connersville to adopt the comprehensive plan for the city of Connersville. It's my estimation that doesn't really affect the commissioner. I guess the commissioner don't necessarily have to adopt, but I think for uniform purposes, it might adopt just so that both codes stay the exact same between the city and county, even though the city doesn't necessarily affect the county. It at least keeps the language the same in both instances. And in case there's any conflict, for justification for what we do. Anybody who's been around knows that has been a long process. I think the first time I went to a potential comprehensive plan meeting was in 2016. And now in 2022, we finally have a plan ready to be heard.
And refresh my memory, when was the last one?
2011. And then before that, it was there was a vision plan in 97 or 2001 vision plan. And then before that, it was 1967 for the first one, which still had the bypass on it.
Right.
Yeah, so that's, if you've ever seen it, it's green and bound, and yeah, I think it was typed on a typewriter. So yeah, that's how long ago the first comprehensive plan was. So we're ready to put that step behind us. At this point, I would entertain a motion to move the City of Connersville Comprehensive Plan to public hearing once we receive the approval from Okra. I think we're safe to go ahead and say we want to have a public hearing at this point once we get the okay that it meets the requirements of Okra. Jeff, would you say that's? So I would entertain that motion to move forward with a public hearing for the comprehensive plan.
So moved. Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Awesome. We will move forward on the comprehensive plan in a public hearing. Next up on the agenda is our a memo from Bill on a zoning code update for land use and non-conforming lots. Not to get ahead of ourselves, but in the new the proposed comprehensive plan, one of the identifying topics to address in that is housing and working towards making housing more affordable. One of the problems that I see within our zoning code, if you refer to the zoning code requirements, particularly under the R1 zoning district, our interior lot and exterior lot size at 60 and 70 does not really align with most of the lots in the city of Connersville. So unfortunately, if you raise a property in the city of Connersville, that lot becomes unbuildable. Typically, if it does not meet this 60 feet wide and 7,000 square foot minimum. So we know there are dilapidated properties in Connersville that likely need to be torn down. If you tear them down, most of the time they don't meet the requirements to rebuild on. So then you're losing potential housing by raising properties that need to be raised, and you're not able to rebuild. Looking through the various lots, many neighborhoods are as small as 40 feet wide. Later neighborhoods end up at 50 feet wide, and all of the ones post 93 are larger, meet this requirement. I wouldn't ask to change any except for the R1 or R2, particularly R1, especially the R1 district within the city where it makes sense, because our lots don't comply. I mean, I want to have usable lots. I think everybody wants to have a lot that somebody can potentially build a house on if they want to. And I've asked the assessor to see if he can pull data a little better than just clicking on the individual properties and doing it that way. See if he has a way of pulling the script to look at what our actual average lot size is for an R1 zoning inside the city, and for our hamlets on the outskirts, so Everton and Alquan, these kind of platted areas that probably are smaller than 6,000 square feet. Again, if you tear it down, then you can't rebuild. Regardless of there being a house there before or not. I wouldn't look to change any of the setbacks. I mean, front and rear setbacks are 5 feet on the side, 25 in the front and rear. And we still have a requirement of no more than 35% of a lot being covered. That includes the dwelling, driveway. If there's a garage or anything like that, you can't exceed that 35%. And just a quick search that Bill and I did, we came up with that 4,000 square foot number under discussion point 1, because that seemed to be on par with most of the lots that we clicked on. Edgewood, McFarland's Grand Avenue plot, East Connersville, they all seem to be in that 40 to 50 foot range. Looking at lots that are available in town that are currently for sale, and then you click on it and, well, it's 41 by 105, and you're like, well, you can't build anything on it, so how desirable is this lot necessarily? If somebody wanted to build, they couldn't, because it doesn't meet those requirements. The proposed comprehensive plan also encourages us to infill development on these properties, and in brownfields, in various non-conforming properties. Looking at minimum dwelling size, there are definitely people who would like to have the ability to build a house smaller than 1,080 square feet, which is what's required now. I don't know if we would look to change that. I think our minimum sizes should reflect our town. You know, if the average dwelling size in an R1 district is 900 square feet, I mean, I think our rules should reflect the rest of the community. That's something else that I've asked Assessor Coleman to look at to see if there's a way to pull the script. It's not a searchable thing at the assessor's office, but he's attempting to see if he can pull the data in a different way. If not, then literally it's clicking on the parcel, opening up the property card, and doing it that way. So, not really looking forward to that being the answer to go through. You know, in Bill's suggestion here, you know, research using the county GIS. I'm hoping that there's an easier way through technology to not have to click, but
Yeah, because I think about like the single homes, yeah, up in our next part, are probably very close to that.
yeah. This is one of those, I wish Mr. Stewart were here to ask him about the, obviously that's his job as an appraiser. Real estate market's been, wild the last couple of years, so to give an honest opinion on like what he's seeing as far as dwelling sizes that are selling and how that reflects historically to our community, and whether or not that is unjustifiable to reduce that or we leave it the same. I don't know that answer. It's something that we definitely need to research, and then it shows that we're making an effort to do what our comprehensive plan tells us that we are to do. Yes, sir.
Could I address the commission, please?
Yes, sir.
This concerns the area that you've just been talking about. My name is Tom Day. I live at 905 Ranch Road. I was a single home builder here in Connersville for over 25 years. I can tell you that you're headed down the right path, in my opinion. Building lots at this time are almost non-existent. And like you were speaking, ones that are buildable on are, they're of no value. Okay? And the only thing I know about this is what I read in the newspaper. And I know that Mr. Stewart was talking at the time about approximately 750 square foot for a single family residence. I would agree with that figure very much. I run into this lots of times during the 25 years I was building here. Also, the tiny homes, I know there's some discussion of that. If that were to become a possibility, I very much would be interested in being a tiny home builder here in town. Right now I sell pre-established buildings up on Park Road. I've only been there a couple of months, okay? And some of those come in sizes that could be finished into a tiny home. And there are people that's all they need. There's also people that's all they can afford.
Correct.
Okay? And I've run into that before. And the last couple of years, I've been building in Florida. The price of material, you just couldn't afford to build a new home in Connersville. Okay, the people that live here that are average like me, they just cannot afford. I have seen 2x4s, 8 foot at $12. Okay, you just can't do that. Okay. But I just wanted to express my opinion and let you know that as a former builder here, I would very much be interested in seeing you pursue this. I think you're on the right track. I think you would find there would be more developers interested in coming to this area, and there would be more builders interested in coming to this area. And I was interested in taking down some of the homes that are around town that need to, but when I found out I couldn't build on a lot, I just bypassed it, you know? So, but there are some areas in this town that there are some properties that honestly need to go, okay? I don't consider them habitable,
Right, yeah.
and that's just my opinion. But if you make the changes that you're talking about and bring that to legality, I think you'd all be doing the city and the county a favor. And I think you might be surprised at the responses you would get, especially in tiny homes. Just before I left Florida, there was one area, 250 tiny homes were approved in one subdivision. Now, I don't expect that to happen in Connersville, of course, but that's just how it's happening in other places. The tiny homes are a coming thing, and they do provide a need, and obviously you'll have rules, regulations, so forth, how they have, what code they have to meet and so forth. I have no problems with that. You always had the 1,090 or 80 square foot at times was a problem and cost me some build jobs, okay? People just could not afford that. And or they do need it. Like me, there's just myself and my wife now. We used to, and we had 3 kids, we need a lot of room.
You needed it, yeah.
Now we don't. We just need room to get away from each other for a little bit.
Absolutely.
So, I just wanted to let you know my opinion and let you know I think you're headed down the right road.
Thank you, sir.
I appreciate your time.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, and along that same line, like obviously, the goal is to increase the tax base by encouraging new buildings. You know, one thing we would not want to do is to harm assessed values in Fayette County by putting housing in areas where it doesn't necessarily make sense or doesn't fit the rest of a neighborhood. You know, none of these changes would affect a subdivision covenants like those. We don't enforce those, but we also, you know, if it's there, we can't, you know, with the wipe of a wand say you have to comply with our rules that we want you to comply with, even though, you know, it's your subdivision. Some have restrictions, some do not. We don't even have a comprehensive list of what the covenants of different subdivisions are. So, not that we would enforce them anyway, but I think it's one of those things that's nice to know beforehand. Bill won't not grant somebody a permit based on that, but he can at least tell them that it's against the covenants. Bill or whomever the employee is. Then moving on to number 3, non-conforming lots. And instead of, you know, a sweeping change to dwellings, maybe in a lot that is smaller. These are 2 separate points, so 3 goes into a different point of non-conforming lots. Maybe that answer is 80. You know, if the lot size is 80% of the conforming lot, reduce everything to conform to 80%. To meet that standard, so that a lot doesn't become undevelopable for lack of size. You know, that's sort of that. And then on a further point is on front yard setback. We have a 25-foot front yard setback. There are many subdivisions that are closer to the road or closer to the right-of-way than 25 feet. The setback should be whatever the nearest point to the street on a street. That should be the setback. I don't know that 25 is that answer. Now I can understand on new development 25 being the front setback, but on an existing, like if I have a house that sits closer to the road and it's torn down, why should I have to move it back to 25 feet? And now it sits behind all the houses, and it just doesn't, that looks funny in a neighborhood. Would you want to drive down a neighborhood and see a house tucked away? It's a head scratcher, right? You'd start saying, oh, well, that doesn't make any sense. Unless you served on area planning, and then you realize that none of it makes any sense. But no, those are some of the things that Bill and I had discussed. With our lot size requirement, what we end up with is a lot of grass to mow, potentially. I don't mind mowing grass, but it's not my favorite thing in the world to do, and I don't think that we should force a developer to have lots of grass necessarily. I mean, if that's not their forte, or if that's not what they want, we shouldn't necessarily force it upon development. I don't know what everybody else's opinion is on that. Darren, do you have an opinion on that?
Well, I think that, I like the idea of the 80%, and as far as the setbacks go, I think I'm thinking in my head here, going down 27th Street, and you've got one block that the houses are set pretty far back, and then you go to the next block, and they're not so much. Which, I guess, creates less front yard, but then you got one back, and that's great for all the guys who are running mowing companies. But
Right.
especially if one of our goals is looking at our aging population.
Mr. Munson, do you have an opinion on reducing?
I agree with what he's saying. You gotta set it up to where everything looks, you gotta have the look.
Right. Absolutely.
I think this is one way to do that.
And especially considering that in town anyway, a lot of our lots are smaller than what we tell you that you need to build on. That was the whole reasoning for even looking at that. I'm trying to encourage people to develop and redevelop things.
And well, there was just one torn down at the corner of 27th Park, and I would question whether or not that met the criteria to be rebuilt on.
I think it does. It's deeper than you think. I think it's 71 by 180. It's a lot larger. But I can think of a house on about 11th and Grand that burnt down a decade or so ago, and now has a white fence around it. That lot was not rebuildable. It didn't meet the requirement to be rebuilt on. In my neighborhood, there are 2 empty lots that are too small to be built on. There's another empty lot that it is large enough to be built on. So there's 3 lots in a couple of block period where 2 of them aren't buildable, 1 of them is buildable. So. And then point 4, accessory dwelling unit, which kind of is a shift. An accessory dwelling unit would be a mother-in-law suite at a house, a single-family dwelling, or the use of a tiny home at on your property as a temporary use for a family member, a relative, somebody to live on, with a maximum of 1. If you look bullet point number 2, an attached conversion at a minimum of 120 square feet. That number actually comes from HUD. HUD says you only need 120 square feet of living space for an apartment. That is their standard. So the federal government.
That's getting away from his wife.
Yeah, that is a very tiny space. And the reason that when Bill and I talked, the suggestion of an attached space, I don't think you could conceivably build a detached space at 120 square feet that would be, actually livable. I mean, that would be quite difficult that small. A 10 by 12 room, like that's that is quite small but if it's attached, clearly you can have easement and access to the rest of a house, but also an exterior, a new door, separating it and to meet that standard. On a freestanding, between 200 and 400 square feet, if you have a detached 200, maximum of 400, and that is so a lot of the park model homes, the tiny homes, are approximately 400 square feet. Most of them are about, some go a little over 400, but like looking at and doing research on those type of homes, 400 was the average, or right at. Those would look similar if you've been down to Ainsley's this summer, or the Gibbs that have the RV sales across the street from when you turn on 101. Those smaller, that would be a park model. So they're right at about 400 square feet. And these would be a maximum of one per parcel. You'd have to meet all the other requirements, lot coverages and whatnot, and meet all the setbacks of the zoning district. So if it is a trailer, what are essentially an RV, a trailer, you couldn't have it in your front yard. So RVs in general cannot be on the front setback of your house. So if you have a long driveway, technically you're not even allowed to park your camper in your driveway in Fayette County, the way the rules are written. It has to be behind the front setback of your house. One of the other discussion points that Bill and I had, being on the same water, sewer, and electric, I don't know if that's necessarily possible. That's a question for Connersville Utilities, Everton Utilities. Conceivably being on the same well and septic wouldn't necessarily be a problem, but that would require approval from the health department. Matt Shirk would tell you whether or not that addition, your septic service could handle the additional 400 square feet. So there are questions that we still have on accessory dwelling units, but I think as really particularly under how things were with COVID, I think people are more hesitant to send their loved ones to a traditional nursing home. They would rather admittedly, it was a scary situation when you had family members that you weren't allowed to go visit. Yeah, that's a scary situation for anyone. Like looking at somebody through a piece of glass is not something that people necessarily want, and changing our rules to allow something like that not to happen, I think works to the better of everybody in the community.
Absolutely.
So yeah, there's still some work to do on that. We're nowhere close to wanting to change the rules, but that at least gets the discussion started, and it's something to think about as we move forward. It also means we are working on the proposed comprehensive plan early, and I want to stay on that as much as we can to achieve as much as we can. In the director's report, we'll move on to number 5. I don't see anything out of the ordinary in the director's report. I didn't have any questions for Bill when I looked through this. If there are no questions, I would entertain a motion to accept the director's report.
Make a motion to approve.
Second.
Is that you, Brian?
Yeah.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. And adjournment. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Yeah.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Thank you, everyone.